The smoke alarm went off at 11:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and for a single, stupid second, I thought it was the turkey. It wasn't. It was my cousin setting off the kitchen smoke detector on purpose to get everyone out of the living room so she could go through my purse. But I didn't know that yet. I was standing in the driveway in my socked feet, holding a dish towel, watching my aunt wave her arms under the detector while her daughter, my cousin Bridget, stood in the doorway looking helpful and concerned. The cold hit my ankles first. December in Ohio doesn't negotiate. It just arrives. I wrapped my arms around myself and thought, this is fine. It's a false alarm. We'll be back inside in 3 minutes. We were back inside in 3 minutes. But nothing was fine after that. Before I tell you what my grandfather found on Bridget's phone 2 hours later, the thing that made my entire family go completely silent in a way I had never heard before. I want you to understand what that Christmas meant to me. I was 28. I'd spent the last 4 years working double shifts at a physical therapy clinic, living in a studio apartment with one window that faced a parking garage, eating grocery store sushi on Friday nights as my version of treating myself. That year, I had finally saved enough to put a deposit on a condo, $23,000 sitting in a savings account. My name on it, my work, my out. I told exactly one person about it, my mother. She told Bridget. I found that out later, too. The night started the way family Christmases always do at my grandparents' house in Westerville. Loud, warm, slightly chaotic, smelling of my grandmother's cornbread stuffing, and the particular pine scent of the artificial tree they've had since 1987. My grandfather was in his usual chair by the window. My uncle and aunt were in the kitchen, debating whether the gravy needed more salt. My mother was setting the table, which meant she was also commenting on how everyone else was setting the table. And Bridget was on the couch, looking at her phone with the particular expression she always had. The one that looked like boredom, but was actually surveillance. Bridget is 3 years older than me. She has always been, in the language of our family, the one who figured it out. She married at 25, bought a house at 26, had a baby at 27. My aunt talked about her the way people talk about someone who won a contest everyone else forgot to enter. I was, by comparison, still getting there. My aunt never said it meanly. She didn't have to. The tone did the work. I had learned a long time ago not to share good news with my aunt's side of the family until the good news was irreversible. But I hadn't remembered to tell my mother that, or maybe I had and she forgot. Either way, by the time we sat down to dinner that night, Bridget knew about my condo deposit. She knew the number, she knew which bank I used, and she had been sitting on that information like a crow sitting on a wire, watching and waiting. The smoke alarm was the opening move. When we came back inside, I went to the bathroom to grab a pair of slippers from my overnight bag. That's when I noticed my purse was unzipped. I'm the kind of person who always zips her purse. It's a habit from years of taking the bus in Columbus. I stood there looking at it for a second, then told myself I must have forgotten. I checked my wallet. Credit cards, still there. Cash, still there. I zipped it back up and went to help with dinner. The second move came 40 minutes later, right as we were finishing dessert. My mother's phone buzzed. She looked at it, frowned, looked at me, and said, "Honey, did you move money out of your savings account today?" The table went quiet in that specific way. Tables go quiet when someone has just said something that doesn't belong at a Christmas dinner. I said, "What?" She turned her phone toward me. It was a text from her banking app. She and I share a joint account from when I was in college, a leftover thing we'd never closed. The notification said a transfer had been initiated. Pending. $22,800. To an account I didn't recognize. My hands went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. I grabbed my own phone. My banking app showed the same thing. Transfer pending. Initiated from my device. Timestamp. 11:52 p.m. 5 minutes after the smoke alarm. 5 minutes after we were all standing in the driveway. I looked up. Bridget was already crying. She was sitting across the table with tears running down her face. And she said, in a voice designed to sound heartbroken, that she had noticed something strange on my phone when she went to check the time, that I'd left it on the counter, and she thought she saw someone had been messing with my banking app, and she was so sorry. She didn't want to ruin Christmas, but she thought I should know. There it was, the perfect setup. She'd initiated a transfer from my phone while we were outside. She was crying before anyone could ask questions, and she'd framed the whole thing as her doing me a favor by reporting it. My aunt made a sound of sympathy and reached across to touch Bridget's hand. "She's been worried about telling you," my aunt said, looking at me. "She didn't want you to be upset with her." I looked at Bridget. I looked at the tears. I thought about the smoke alarm. I thought about my unzipped purse. And I thought, she took my phone out of my purse while we were standing outside in the cold. She used my face, my sleeping face, my unlocked face. And she authorized a transfer from my account to somewhere, to her, or someone she knew. I said out loud very calmly, "You did this." The table erupted. My aunt said my name in a tone that meant I was being hysterical. My mother said, "Honey, wait." My uncle put down his fork with a clatter. Bridget's crying intensified in a way that should have gotten her an Oscar nomination. My grandmother pressed her hands flat on the table and said, in her particular quiet way, "Everyone stop." Everyone stopped. My grandmother has that effect. But then my aunt started again, softer this time, more dangerous, the version of her voice that had always made me feel like I was the problem. She said I was under a lot of stress, and that she understood how it might feel easier to point a finger than to accept that I may have accidentally. "She doesn't accidentally transfer $23,000, said a voice from the end of the table. My grandfather hadn't spoken since the alarm went off. He's 74. He was a civil engineer for 31 years. He has a particular relationship with the word evidence. He uses it the way other people use the word obviously. He had been sitting in his chair at the head of the table, listening to everything, with his hands folded on the tablecloth and his eyes moving from face to face like he was reading a blueprint. He looked at Bridget. "Let me see your phone," he said. "Grandpa, that's private. Let me see your phone, sweetheart." It wasn't a question the second time either. His voice was the same temperature it always was, low, even, with a kind of weight in it that made you understand, without him ever raising it, that arguing was not going to work. Bridget looked at her mother. Her mother looked uncertain for the first time all night. "Robert," my aunt started. "Elaine." That was all he said. Just her name. And my aunt sat back. Bridget handed over the phone. My grandfather did not fumble with it, did not put on his reading glasses, did not make a production of it. He had owned a smartphone for 11 years, and he knew exactly what he was looking for. He opened Venmo. He looked at the transaction history for approximately 4 seconds. Then he walked to the living room. We all followed, pulled by something none of us could have named. And he plugged his phone into the HDMI cord he uses to watch football on the big TV. He mirrored Bridget's phone onto the screen. My grandmother's living room television is 55 inches. My grandfather had installed it himself 3 Christmases ago. It is, by family tradition, always set to the fireplace channel during the holidays. The fireplace disappeared. Bridget's Venmo appeared, 4 feet wide, in high definition. The transfer was there. My name, my account, outbound. Timestamp 11:52 p.m. Memo field. Blank. Recipient. An account with the display name BJ Fines, which I later learned was a resale account Bridget ran under her initials, flipping designer goods she bought with other people's money. My aunt said, "That could be anything." My grandfather swiped up. He opened Bridget's texts. He didn't read through them. He didn't invade her personal life. He searched one word, transfer. The result loaded. A text thread between Bridget and someone saved as Kelsey W., sent that morning at 9:14 a.m. "Did you get the routing info from your mom?" She always tells her mom everything lalak so. Tonight after dinner, during, smoke alarm. She'll leave her phone on the counter. She always is a meekers, so smart she's been saving for like 4 years for this condo. Lol one's transfer and bye-bye deposit. The room did not make a sound. I have been in quiet rooms before. I have sat in exam rooms waiting for test results. I have stood at gravesides in November. I know the different kinds of quiet. This one was the kind that happens when something that cannot be unseen has been seen. When a person's version of themselves, the version they've carefully constructed for their family, the version that gets the sympathy and the credit and the benefit of the doubt, just dissolves in real time. Bridget was not crying anymore. My aunt was the first to speak. She said, "That's out of context." My grandfather turned to look at her. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her, the same way he had looked at blueprints when contractors brought him plans that didn't add up. Patient. Certain. "It says bye-bye deposit," my mother said. Her voice was very quiet. "Elaine, it says bye-bye deposit." With an emoji, my aunt opened her mouth, closed it. She knew about the condo, my mother said, and she wasn't talking to Bridget anymore. She was talking to her sister. The only way she knew about the condo was if you told her. Something shifted in my aunt's face then. Not guilt exactly, but the recognition of being caught at something adjacent to guilt. She had told Bridget. She had passed along the information my mother shared in confidence, and what she did with it. What her daughter did with it had started in that kitchen conversation and ended on this television screen. Bridget stood up. She said, in a voice that had lost all its careful softness, that I had always made everything about myself, that I had always been the one the whole family treated like she was so special and so hardworking, while Bridget had been managing a household and a baby and a marriage, and nobody, ever. "Sit down," my grandfather said. She sat down. He wasn't done with the phone. He went back to the mail app. I didn't know what he was looking for. I don't think he did either. I think he was doing what he always did when something didn't add up, which was to keep reading until it did. He found it in the deleted folder. It was an email from the Franklin County Housing Assistance Program, sent to Bridget's email address 3 weeks ago. She had applied for a first-time homeowner supplemental grant, a program that helps low to moderate income families with down payment assistance. She had been denied. The denial letter cited income. Her household income exceeded the threshold. That wasn't the part that mattered. The part that mattered was the attachment she had opened, printed, and then photographed. It was a screenshot of my grant application. My name, my income, my property address, my approval notice, which had been sent to me 6 days before Christmas. I had been approved for $11,000 in down payment assistance. It was tied to the specific condo unit I'd put a deposit on. I had gotten the approval email, saved it to my downloads folder, and hadn't told anyone yet because I wanted to tell my mother in person on Christmas morning. Bridget had found it. She must have had my email password from years ago, some shared account from college I'd never thought to close. She had found my approval, photographed it, and then reported the property address to the housing authority, claiming I had misrepresented my income on the application. The complaint was dated December 19th. The approval had been paused pending review. My grandfather read this out loud, all of it, in the same voice he used to read engineering specifications. Flat, precise, without inflection. When he finished, he set the phone down on the coffee table. He did not throw it. He did not raise his voice. He just set it down and looked at his granddaughter and said, "You didn't just try to take her money. You tried to take away something she'd earned fair and square, and then you tried to make sure she couldn't get it back." Bridget started to say something. My grandfather held up one hand, and she stopped. I looked at my aunt. I had spent years making peace with the comparisons, the small cuts, the tone of voice. I had told myself it wasn't intentional, that it was just the way family was, that I was probably too sensitive. But she had told her daughter about my savings account. She had passed along some private information my mother had shared in a moment of sisterly confidence, and her daughter had built a plan around it. I said, "You told her." My aunt said, "I didn't know she would. You told her." She didn't answer. My grandfather stood up. He is not a tall man, but he takes up a certain amount of space that has nothing to do with height. He went to the kitchen and came back with his reading glasses and his address book. An actual paper address book, spiral bound, that he's had for 20 years. He looked up a number. He called it. It was the non-emergency line for the Westerville Police Department. He explained the situation in the same tone he'd used for everything else that night. Attempted financial fraud. Unauthorized access to a mobile device. Unauthorized account transfer. He gave the timestamp, the Venmo account name, the text thread content. He stayed on the phone for 11 minutes. When he hung up, he looked at my aunt and said, "You should probably call Marcus." Marcus was her divorce attorney. She had used him 3 years ago, during a brief separation from my uncle that no one in the family talked about. My grandfather saying his name, in that context, was not a coincidence. It was a reminder that my grandfather paid attention to everything, always, and that what had happened tonight was not something that was going to be smoothed over at Easter. My aunt left the room. Bridget didn't move from the couch. She had stopped crying entirely and sat with her arms crossed and her jaw set, which was, I realized, probably the most honest expression I had ever seen on her face. My grandmother went to the kitchen and came back with 2 mugs of decaf and a plate of the cutout cookies she made every year. The ones with the thick white frosting and the red sugar sprinkles. She set 1 mug thus in front of me and sat down in her usual chair and said, "Eat something." I ate something. A patrol officer came at 1:15 a.m. He was professional and thorough and younger than me by at least 3 years. He took photos of the television screen, Bridget's Venmo, the text thread, the deleted email, before my grandfather unplugged the HDMI. He collected Bridget's phone as evidence. He explained the process for reversing the pending transfer, which my grandfather had already started before he even arrived. Bridget was not arrested that night. The officer explained that the DA's office would review and determine charges. What I know is that the transfer was fully reversed within 48 hours. The Housing Authority complaint was withdrawn after my grandfather submitted a formal letter and the text thread screenshot. My grant approval was reinstated in January. I closed on the condo on March 3rd. It has 2 windows that face actual trees. The thing about being in a family where one person gets to be the success story is that everyone else builds their identity around that story too. My aunt had spent so long being the mother of the daughter, who figured it out that she'd stopped noticing what her daughter was actually doing. Bridget had spent so long being the one who arrived first, that she couldn't stand watching someone else walk through a door, even a door she didn't want. They weren't protecting a family that night. They were protecting a story. My grandfather made hot chocolate after the officer left, the old-fashioned kind, whole milk and cocoa powder on the stovetop, the way he's made it since I was 6 years old. He handed me a mug without saying anything, and we sat at the kitchen table while my grandmother wrapped up the leftover cookies, and my mother washed dishes quietly at the sink. He said, "Eventually, the routing information, she got it from your mother, who got it from you." "I know," I said. "You'll be more careful." "I will." He nodded. That was all. He didn't tell me it wasn't my fault. He didn't apologize for his daughter. He didn't make it into something it wasn't. He just said I'd be more careful, and I said I would, and we both understood that this was the conversation we were having and the only one we needed to. I am more careful now. About who I tell things to. About which doors I leave open from the past. Old passwords, old shared accounts, old habits of assuming that family means safe. I've learned that those are different things. They can overlap sometimes, but they're not the same. The condo smells like fresh paint and coffee every morning. There are trees outside my window and no parking garage, and on some nights I hear actual birds. I earned that. Every dollar, every month, every double shift. And nobody gets to take that from me now.